This week's specials for Miles Franklin are 2023 1-ounce silver kangaroos, only $3.19 over spot, 90% dimes and quarters, $2.75 over spot, and quarter-ounce gold eagles for $69 over melt. We have a massive inventory and cheap prices. Folks, you could text, email, or call slayer@milesfranklin.com, and I'd be happy to help. Now let's get into the video.
Yes, we signed an executive order to go green. And yes, we've let this country turn into a place that most of us who are my age or older don't recognize anymore, with lawlessness and open borders and election and judicial system questions and wokeness and cancel culture and all of the things that, you don't respect authority. You can question it when I grew up, but you respected it. Now you just don't respect it. And your teachers, your police officers, even your parents. So many of the things that made this country, I've talked with you a lot about, how much I think that is part of this whole thing. Could it be planned, or is this all too stupid to be stupid? Because in being the world reserve currency, a privilege we ought to be clinging to. And, I've talked a lot about how we're destroying that privilege, and how Jared Bernstein, the lead economic advisor of this country, advocates for losing the reserve status, and how signing an executive order to go green, which is the linchpin of the dollar hegemony, by extension, our relationship with OPEC and Saudi Arabia, and their willingness for protection to price oil globally in dollars and then take the proceeds and put it in treasuries. All of these things are changing largely because of the weaponization of the dollar, on top of everything else I just said. And I talked last week or the week before with you about how Janet Yellen was in Brazil, which is a member of the BRICS, and said we need to not just sanction Russian assets, 380 billion in Forex reserves. We need to confiscate those assets and use them to fund the Ukrainian effort. About as stupid as you can get to say that in Brazil, of all places. But now stupidity is finding another level. And she was just interviewed on CNBC last week, where she said the United States is prepared to sanction Chinese banks and companies, as well as Beijing leadership, if they aid in Russia's military invasion of the Ukraine, Janet Yellen said. And we stand ready to act if we see significant violations. And, this is so crazy that we, the world reserve currency, the dollar, the hypocritical country, at least that's how they view us, can aid the Ukraine, which really isn't even our huge ally, right? I mean, we're pretending they are because of where they're geographically located. But, Russia and China are charter members of the BRICS, and they are allies. And it's not okay for China to help Russia. But it is okay for us to help the Ukraine, and we'll sanction you just like we did Russia. And she said China is entitled, thank you, Janet, to have a relationship with Russia. That's great of her. And noting that much of the trade between the two countries is seen as non-problematic by the U.S., but the provision of military aid from Beijing to Moscow will trigger sanctions. So the hypocrisy that continues to grow, and the fact that gold and silver are assets that have no counterparty liability, that cannot be confiscated or sanctioned or have default risk. And so the world, I think, is moving away from the United States, not because we are going green and we could lose the petro status as a result, not because of the craziness that we have allowed to happen in this country. I mean, it's not lost on everyone else, but the fact that we can go around and tell everyone, you can, you can't, you do this, doesn't matter that we did something similar or worse, we say you can't, and as a result, we'll sanction you. So what is the logical outcome to that? Well, that is that all these countries bind together and find another alternative to settlement for energy. And I believe that's what you're seeing happen in gold and silver and oil. They are being remonetized around the world, and they are being used in settlement, local currencies to settle, and then these assets to act as reserve, if you will. The U.S. Treasury was always the reserve. That was part of the petro deal. We sell oil in dollars and put the reserves in treasuries. And the reserves in treasuries, well, they've been dwindling as these countries are selling treasuries and buying metal, not just gold. India, as we talked about 400 million ounces of silver the last 2 years. And those numbers are up 286% right now in February. In fact, they've accumulated almost as much so far in the first 2 months, and I know we're past the first 2 months, but those are just the numbers that we saw so far, January and February, where their numbers are up 286% from where they were last year. Last year, they bought 3,625 tons of silver, more than anyone in the world. And in the first 2 months, they bought 2,932 tons that we know of. Well, all I'm simply saying to you is this is getting real. And it's getting very real because these countries are pushing back against everything insanity, or all the insanity, everything insane that is this country right now, both internally and externally, in our geopolitical affairs and in our own backyard here, where we're allowing things to happen in this country that if you're my age or older, you can't believe your eyes. I mean, this country, you were proud to be an American. You were proud to say, I voted. I put that sticker on because you knew it was a fair and impartial election. Everyone came to this country from somewhere. A guy across the street from me here, he came here from Montreal, and he became a citizen recently after, I don't know how many years. And he was so proud and sent out pictures to all of us in the neighborhood, and so happy that he did it the right way, that he emigrated the right way. And all of these things that made America special, a Justice Department that looked at everyone as being innocent before guilty and presumed innocent, and would be blind in terms of making that determination instead of prejudiced and two-tiered, and all of these things. You can't believe it. This is all coming together at once. And when you have further weaponization of the dollar by a country viewed as hypocritical by the countries that we would impose this upon, that are now becoming sophisticated and wealthy enough and shrewd enough to push back, like the BRICS, like China, like Russia, like India, like Saudi Arabia. This is becoming dangerous, and more so by the moment. And I just want people to understand, just when I thought it couldn't get more stupid, Janet Yellen says we're going to sanction not just the Chinese banks and companies, but the country itself. And you wonder why the central banks of the world are loading up on gold and silver and rare earths and base metals and so everything they can. And almost all of it is settling outside the dollar. So yeah, dude, this is just beginning, and it's going to be one hell of a crazy second half of 2024.
I actually showed something yesterday on my channel that goes along with India. China also switches strategy from stacking gold to, quote, take all the silver, sticking it to US short sellers and market riggers. Even someone says, my wife's in China, she speaks and reads fluent Mandarin. She told me last night, Chinese media is writing articles recommending silver as a better investment as gold gets more expensive. So it's not even just India, it's also China now. Also, they're all focusing on silver.
One of the things that right before you clicked it off, the Shanghai is bidding 30 or selling silver for 32 bucks an ounce, or buying silver rather for 32 bucks an ounce. This is the arbitrage we've talked about, where the traders in the West who can take silver off of the exchanges in London and in the United States off of COMEX have the ability to deliver it in Shanghai at a premium. This is arbitrage. It'll go higher once no one is stupid enough to deliver at these prices. Then it will continue to move higher. And you're right. If indeed they entice their populace to buy silver instead of buying gold, yeah, it could get very, very, very crazy very, very fast. And this is at the same time that the American public, if you look at the ETFs and look at the public participation, have been asleep at the switch watching NVIDIA and Bitcoin. The Chinese populace are not. And if indeed they start to accumulate silver in any meaningful fashion, very quickly you could see things become overwhelmed, if you will, in terms of price, and all resistance levels broke through. The Silver Academy, John Little is a very smart dude, and he's a great researcher, and I'll give him that. Whether it be talking about this or his research in the military-industrial complex, he's an interesting dude who sees things very clearly with silver. And if he's even 10% right on that, if indeed we are going to see China really focus on silver accumulation, it's a market that it's very small market in comparison to gold, in comparison to the Forex market. It's a tiny market, and one that can very quickly overrun and overwhelm short positions that have really, haven't seen a injection of insane demand like that. If indeed that's the case, yeah, buckle up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Silver's a much smaller market than gold. It's also that's why it's more volatile and easier to manipulate. And that's actually what he was saying in the article is like the Wall Street silver guys, like that's just a few people that got rich off GameStop and AMC. There's levels to this though. That's a few people that push silver to $30 in a couple of days. Imagine an entire country like China. There's levels to this. If those guys could push silver to 30, just a few people that transfer their profits from GameStop, a few stocks. Imagine what an entire country could do on
Yeah,
top of
by the way,
India as
I
well.
I, I was on the airplane coming back from Europe and watched the movie Dumb Money, and I would suggest everyone watch that movie. It's the story of GameStop and AMC and the guy behind it, and it's really cool story. But what it shows you, the silver market is much bigger than GameStop and AMC. But what it
Yeah.
shows you is what happens when demand overwhelms short positions, and it's a movie that is incredibly entertaining. It's a true story, and it shows you just what happens when you see a very large concentrated short position that can get overwhelmed very quickly by insatiable, never ending demand.